In order to repay a kindness, I married a poor lad. After marriage, I never gave him a pleasant look. He was never angry and just tidied up everything at home properly. Then he would tie his tie neatly and go to work. A few years later, when he had achieved success in his career, then I felt that I was starting to like him a little. My family went bankrupt. One sign it. A divorce agreement was neatly placed in front of me. Vincent calmly capped his signature pen, looking completely relaxed. Just a week ago, he had repeatedly asked me, "Do you still want a divorce?" Even though I was bankrupt and had nothing. And the turnover in his hands now was over 100 million every day. I sniffed and still nodded. Yes. My marriage to Vincent was arranged by my grandfather. At that time, he was just a poor lad running sales every day. And I was the well-known daughter of the Maggie family. He happened to save my grandfather who had a heart attack. And my grandfather liked him very much. In order to repay the kindness, with a wave of his hand, he let me marry him. He didn't have much money. Even the wedding ring was bought by my family. I thought it was shameful and didn't even want to hold a wedding. Just getting the marriage certificate was enough. On the wedding night, he stood at the door, not daring to come in. I was so angry that I grabbed a remote control and threw it at him. "What are you standing there for? Do you want grandfather to see and scold me?" He didn't dodge and took it straight. Then said in a hoarse voice, "Sorry. I'm just afraid of offending you." Actually, he was quite good-looking and very tall. But as soon as I thought that I had married a poor wretch, I couldn't stand the sight of him no matter how I looked at him. My sisters with worse conditions than me could all marry very well. I, the daughter of the Maggie family. Why should I marry such a useless person? I pointed at the mattress on the floor beside the bed. "Don't get any ideas. You sleep here and don't touch me." Vincent walked over, looked down at the messy mattress I had casually thrown on the floor, and nodded gently, "Okay." 3 The next morning, my room was much neater. Even the messy mattress on the floor last night was neatly folded in the corner. I couldn't help but praise, "Betty, you've tidied up really neatly today." Betty, who was holding a mop, was stunned. "Miss." It was Mr. Vincent who tidied up your things. Vincent was always like this. He was extremely meticulous in some important little things. For example, a cup of warm boiled water every morning, a beverage bottle with the cap loose and in advance, the countertop that was always tidy, fresh flowers for every festival. Even if I never appreciated it, he would just look at me without getting angry, smile gently and say, "I'm happy to do it." Sometimes for the occasions where we needed to attend together, he would spend several hours dressing up and tidying himself carefully. He would say, "I won't embarrass you." Then in front of everyone, he doted on me in every possible way. But the most common sentence I said to him was, "Vincent, when grandfather gives his permission, we'll get divorced." He would always lower his eyes and answer softly, "Okay," he said, "as long as you're happy." Sometimes I also suspected that he might like me. But this idea was quickly dismissed by me. No one would like someone who gave them a cold face every day. But it's not difficult to fall in love with someone who is kind to you every day. Once Vincent had a late-night business dinner, and grandfather asked me to pick him up. I was unwilling and threw a tantrum, getting caught in the rain. As a result, I had a high fever that wouldn't go away. I was so delirious from the fever. All I could feel was someone holding my hand all the time. His voice was trembling. "Maggie, please." With a plop, a drop of water stained my hand. I opened my eyes with all my strength. I saw Vincent squatting beside my bed with red-rimmed eyes. Actually, I didn't know why he was so worried about me. Apart from grandfather, he was probably the only person in this world who truly cared about me. At that time, his company had actually been listed on the stock market. He made the company go public by his own ability without using any resources from the Maggie family. I don't know how much hardship he had endured secretly. He came home later, and later and later. I always pretended not to care. The most awkward thing I said was, "You come home so late every day. You must also be eager to get divorced early, right?" Vincent was stunned for a moment. He stood at the entrance for a long time without speaking. 5 later, Vincent was still as gentle and considerate to me as always. It was just that he talked less and less. Every time he looked at me, there was an indescribable sadness in his eyes. I knew he was thinking about the divorce. But when I finally made up my mind, starting from tomorrow, stop being so difficult and be nice to Vincent. Early the next morning, just as I opened my eyes, I received the news that Maggie's family had gone bankrupt. Grandpa fell ill and was hospitalized. Maggie's family was completely beyond redemption. It turned out that the Maggie family, which I had always thought was glamorous, was actually being supported by Grandpa alone with great difficulty. That day, Grandpa, with tears in his eyes, relented. He said he would not interfere with me and Vincent anymore. If Vincent wanted to leave, he would not allow me to pester him either. Vincent held the hospital bed and told Grandpa to have a good rest. As soon as he turned around and walked out of the door, he asked me, "Do you still want a divorce?" I gritted my teeth and couldn't say no. I had waited until Grandpa relented. But it seemed that I had already fallen in love with Vincent. Even if I really didn't want to divorce him, in this situation, he would only think that I wanted to cling to his money because of the bankruptcy. Right? I sniffed and clenched my fists and said, "Yes." Vincent gave me a week to think about it. He said whether to divorce or not depended on my decision. But after 7 days, I still hadn't changed my mind. I signed the divorce agreement. 1 copy for him and 1 for me. Vincent took those thin sheets of paper and looked at them over and over again. After being tormented by me for so long, he should be very relaxed now. Right? I dragged my luggage and was about to leave. He stopped me. "Maggie, do you really want nothing?" Now Vincent's wealth was so much that I couldn't count it with both hands. But on the property division agreement, I only took an apartment as a place for me to live in the future. The Maggie family had already been mortgaged to him by Grandpa when the Maggie family's capital chain broke. I had no face to ask him for anything. "Yes. I'm very grateful that you are willing to give me a place to live." After saying that, I didn't even dare to turn around to look at him. I walked away quickly, dragging my luggage. On the first day after leaving, I bought a second-hand electric bike and found a job delivering food. After running around all day, the money I earned was not even enough for one of my previous meals. Near dusk, I received a big order, 30 cups of coffee, to be delivered to an office building in the city center. The address looked familiar to me. When I got there, I found that Vincent's company was here. I immediately became flustered, afraid of being recognized. But a woman at the front desk noticed that I was sneaking around and recognized me as soon as she came over. "Maggie? What are you doing here?" I knew that she was Yvonne, Vincent's business partner. She tilted her head, saw me clutching the takeout bag tightly, and laughed again. "TSK. Delivering food? Miss Maggie, are you finally going to experience the hardships of the world? But it's no one else's fault. Vincent was so nice to you before. You always looked down on him. He was tormented by you for so long. It's really decent of him not to retaliate against you now. Are you very regretful? Even if you had been a little nicer to him." She babbled a lot. I pretended not to hear and put the takeout on the counter. "The takeout has been delivered. Please sign for it." Just as I was about to turn around and leave, Yvonne reached out to stop me. "Wait. Who told you that it's okay to deliver it here?" I frowned. She pointed at the sign of the conference room, not far away. "Deliver it to the conference room." There was a sense of provocation in her eyes. I guessed who was in the conference room. But this order was a big one. I couldn't not deliver it. Just as I got to the door, a burst of laughter came from inside. Speaking of which, it was really not easy when we first started our business. Yes. When we worked overtime, our wives brought us food and clothes. But Mr. Shenhan's so busy that he was constantly on the go. And he still had to serve a woman when he went home. Exactly. That overbearing woman from the Maggie family. Only Mr. Shen could tolerate her. Fortunately, now Mr. Shen has finally come through all the hardships. Congratulations, Mr. Shenhe. You're out of the sea of suffering. Throughout the whole process, I didn't hear Vincent's voice. I pressed the brim of my hat as low as possible and pushed the door open. The takeout has been delivered. Please sign for it. Someone came to take it. Who let you barge in like this? So rash. I'm sorry. I buried my head very low and roughened my voice. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of a figure that was originally sitting casually. At the moment of seeing me, it became extremely straight. A stunned and disbelieving gaze fell directly on me. Vincent must have recognized me. How embarrassing. I remember that day last year when Vincent had his birthday. The family bought a cake and I was in a good mood. I told him that he could make a wish with me. He stared at me for a long time before tentatively asking, "Before going to work tomorrow, could you help me tie my tie?" There was a bright glint in his eyes. Looking very cautious. But I put my hands on my hips. I've never done any work since I was a child. What are you thinking? Do you want me, a young lady, to serve others? The light in Vincent's eyes dimmed. But he didn't show any unhappiness. Instead, he smiled and said, "Right. For this kind of thing, I'll do it myself." He still tidied up everything at home properly every day, and then tied his tie by himself before going to work. At that time, neither of us probably thought that just 1 year later, he would be successful in his career while I had to deliver food to make a living. I'm actually not very skilled at riding the electric bike. When the road was a little slippery because of the rain, I fell flat on my face. When I got up while propping myself up on the ground all covered in dirt, someone had already helped my electric bike up. Vincent's eyes showed very complicated emotions. "Maggie," I said, "I could help you arrange a job." I quickly hid my dirty hands behind my back. "Why are you here?" He stared at me for a few seconds and then grabbed my hand and walked away. I staggered a few steps. "Hey, what are you doing? What about my bike?" Vincent tightened his grip on my hand and his voice was indisputable. "I'll compensate you for it later. Is that okay?" In the past, he was always obedient to me. I rarely saw him in such a strong-willed manner. Subconsciously, I kept silent. He led me all the way to the car parked by the roadside. He took out the first aid kit from the trunk and carefully cleaned the fresh cut on my hand. I couldn't help but remind him, "Vincent, we are divorced." He didn't even raise his head. "So what? Can you just make yourself like this?" His voice was tinged with a little anger. I felt uncomfortable and also ashamed. I shrank my neck. "No." Vincent looked up at me, and his eyes were full of emotions that I couldn't understand. "Stop delivering food. Okay?" I subconsciously refused. "Then what?" "I need to earn money." Suddenly, he tightened his grip on my hand as if he was a little angry. "I have money." I looked at him, not understanding what he meant. Vincent's expression became more and more complicated. It seemed like pain, and also some struggle. "Don't you really know that as long as you ask, I will give it to you?" 11. He held my wrist. The grip became tighter and tighter. I tried hard to recall. In the past, did Vincent ever ask me for money? It seemed not. Even at the very beginning, when he earned pitifully little money, buying me a gift would cost him most of his salary. Later, although I knew clearly that it was difficult for him to start his business, I never took the initiative to ask. When he needed funds, he didn't ask me either. I thought that if he couldn't get the money, he would always be unable to resist asking me for help. But after waiting and waiting, his company had been set up without my knowing when. What was he thinking at that time? My heart grew colder and colder. I tried to pull my hand out. I said I don't want yours. Vincent refused to let go. Maggie. Can you stop being so stubborn? I'm not. I looked up and looked at him seriously. Vincent. I know I'm sorry to you and I'm ridiculous enough now. For the sake of our once being husband and wife. When we meet again in the future, just pretend you've never known me. Okay? He was instantly stunned. It seemed that something in his eyes was breaking into pieces little by little. 12 since that day. I haven't seen Vincent again. He probably took my words to heart. Or perhaps we had become people from two different worlds and should never have met again in the first place. After delivering food for a few more days, the resumes I sent out finally got a reply. They said they would let me start as an assistant in their auction house. When I arrived, a few people were still discussing. Maggie's resume is quite excellent, and she applied for a designer position. But it was interrupted by a female voice. What's the use of an excellent resume? Yvonne walked in on her high-heeled shoes. Maggie's family has collapsed and Mr. Shen doesn't want her anymore. Any company with a little sense will not hire her. It's only me who is not worried about Vincent getting angry with me and can give her a chance. She raised her chin slightly, looking very proud on her face. It's not bad to have an assistant position. What do you think? The string that had been taut in my mind for several days suddenly snapped. I had been wondering all this time why all of my resumes had disappeared without a trace. So it was because of Vincent? Because he hated me. Other companies were also unwilling to hire me. When I was at the end of my rope and turned to him for help, he could be as condescending as I had been to him before and offer me help like charity. Seeing that I hadn't reacted for a long time, Yvonne was displeased. What kind of expression is that? It seems as if Vincent has done you such a great wrong. Although you didn't get any money, just the ring he bought for you before was enough to ensure you a worry-free life for the rest of your life. Right? I was stunned for a moment. Subconsciously, I asked. What ring? 13. Yvonne glared at me. That 23-carat pink dime and cut ring. It was originally going to be auctioned. But when he heard it could be used as a wedding ring, he bought it outright. It cost him more than 20 million. Do you really want me to say it out loud? I was a bit distracted. Then I quickly shook my head. You're wrong. He hasn't given me a ring. Vincent would give me gifts on every festival. But there was no ring. So, he had also bought such an expensive ring. Who was it for? Was it for the person he liked? When Yvonne heard me say this, she first frowned, subconsciously wanting to scold me. But then she paused. She tilted her head and thought carefully for a while. Then became gloating all of a sudden. He didn't give it to you? But I heard that he bought it as a wedding ring. It's not for you? You're so pitiful. As she laughed, the people behind her couldn't help but laugh as well. Laughing at me for not having received a ring even though I had once been Vincent's wife. My fingers clenched unconsciously. Just as I was thinking about whether it was necessary to keep this job or not, a sudden voice rang out. It was bought for her. I turned my head in astonishment. Vincent was standing at the door, wearing a black overcoat. With his hands down, he was looking at me quietly. 14. He walked into the room and towards Yvonne. That ring was bought for her. From the very beginning. I bought it because I wanted to give it to her. His eyes swept over me, with a flash of loneliness. And his voice became a little lower. It's just, I haven't found the right opportunity to give it to her yet. Yvonne froze on the spot. Vincent said again. Do you have any other questions? If not, I want to take her to get her ring right now. Yvonne seemed to be choked by something. After a long while, she said, no. Vincent turned around and took my hand. In the astonished eyes of everyone, he strode out. My mind went blank. Until I was stuffed into the car. The roar of the engine brought me back to reality. I looked at the man beside me who looked as usual. Vincent. What do you mean? He didn't look sideways. The ring was really bought for you. I'm not asking about this. Then what are you asking? A brief silence. Sensing my burning gaze, his Adam's apple bobbed. Why did you hold my hand just now? Couldn't help it. He spoke very quickly. I don't know if he was afraid that I would hear clearly or afraid that I would ask further. I was almost led astray by his way of thinking, so I had to ask directly. I mean, no company was willing to hire me. Was it your intention? Vincent was stunned for a moment. The moment he was at a loss for words. It felt as if a stone was pressing on my heart, barely suppressing the soreness in my nose. I said, "Why did you do this? I'm sorry to you. I can apologize to you. But you..." He quickly interrupted me. No. He pursed his lips. His eyes, sincere. I haven't interfered with these things. But it is indeed because of me that this has happened. I can't deny it. I just found out too. Maggie. Just trust me. Okay? 15 to prove himself. Vincent made several calls on speakerphone one after another. Only then did I learn that Yvonne had, either intentionally or unintentionally, hinted to people that Vincent didn't want me to have an easy time. And it spread quickly. Vincent was a newly rising star in the circle. So naturally no one wanted to offend him because of me. And it was also today that he heard I had come to the auction house. After asking, he just found out about these things. He rushed over immediately. He tried very hard to explain, fearing that I wouldn't believe him. As he talked more, his eyes became a little anxious. Indeed, he had always been gentle and kind-hearted. How could I suspect him of doing such a thing? I felt extremely guilty and quickly changed the topic. What about the ring? What's the situation? Why did you buy it but not give it away? Vincent fell into silence. I thought he didn't want to mention it. So I hurriedly said, I don't mean anything else. I just asked casually. But he was silent for a long time and then said hoarsely, when we got married, I couldn't even buy you a decent ring. When I was able to, I had always wanted to make it up to you. But, I'm sorry, I haven't had time yet. I was stunned for a moment. I thought carefully. I had been clamoring for a divorce every day. There was actually no chance at all for him to take out a wedding ring that he had already bought. Don't apologize. It's not you who should say sorry. In my heart, it felt as if something was tugging at it, making me very uncomfortable. 16 The car drove all the way back to Maggie's home. Vincent tentatively asked, shall we go up together? I was puzzled. Do you really want to give me the ring? Isn't it okay? Who would give a ring to his ex-wife? We can be the first. He looked very serious as he spoke. I was stunned and didn't know how to respond. He noticed my bewilderment and smiled again. Besides, since I've already said it, I have to at least make a show of it, right? Vincent entered the house. He said he would bring me something casually. I stood at the door waiting for him, not daring to move. After waiting for a while, the grandpa living in the next building passed by, while taking a walk, and called out to me, Maggie? Why haven't I seen you for so many days? Because we often helped each other take care of the flowers in the yard. We were fairly familiar with each other on a daily basis. He was just a wealthy old man, and didn't pay attention to the gossip in the circle. I quickly explained, Grandpa, I got divorced and moved away a few days ago. The grandpa was a little surprised. Divorced? You and Zhao Shemho? How could you two get divorced? I didn't know how to explain for a moment. So I had to say, I had no feelings for him. Life was boring. And we would get divorced sooner or later. You don't like Zhao Shenna? The grandpa asked. I thought about it and nodded. Yes. I don't like him. Then why did you get married? I was forced. Not a single bit of feelings? No. Was it the same for Zhao Shenha? Should be. I was about to say it should be so. Suddenly, the grandpa pointed behind me. I'm asking Zhao Shen. I turned around. Vincent was not far away, with a small bag in his hand. I didn't know when he had come out, and how much he had heard. All I could see was that his eyes were gloomy. 17 The grandpa noticed that the atmosphere was wrong and quickly laughed twice. Things among young people. I can't understand either. Maggie. When will your grandpa come back? Let him come to play Chinese chess with me. I didn't dare to tell him that my grandpa was still lying in the ward at present. I just said, okay. No problem. The grandpa left. Vincent gave me the ring. He lowered his eyes and his voice was very low. It's something that can't be given away. It's useless for me to keep it. Just do me a favor and take it. Okay? It was a large square pink diamond, exquisitely set and glittering with brilliant light. It was something that I would have fallen in love with at first sight in the past. But now, after struggling for a long time, I still pushed it back. I can't take it. It's really inappropriate. Keep it for your future wife. She will surely like it. Vincent seemed to be hit by something all of a sudden. He froze for a few seconds. A self-mocking smile emerged on his face. Marry a wife in the future? Maggie. You really know how to stab me right in the heart. He was trying hard to sound relaxed. But on the way of driving me home, he seemed to be in a very bad mood. It seemed that I had made him unhappy somehow. I wanted to ask clearly, but when I saw his gloomy eyes, I dared not speak. Until evening. I got home and was taking off my clothes while taking a bath. Something fell to the ground, making a crisp sound. Looking down, it was a small glittering object. The ring that I hadn't accepted. Vincent had secretly put it into my pocket at some time. The next day. I received several interview notices from HR. As if they had made an appointment. I couldn't help asking. Did someone tell you something? The HR on the other end of the line was silent for a few seconds before saying, no. You're overthinking it. The denial was very guilty looking. But even if there was some favoritism involved, I had no reason not to accept. After thinking it over and over again, I sent a message to Vincent. Thank you. He didn't reply for a long time. I thought he didn't want to have more to do with me. As a result, until evening, he suddenly called me. Looking at the caller ID, I hesitated for a moment and then picked it up. What's the matter? The voice coming from the other end was not Vincent's. It was an unfamiliar male voice. Excuse me for disturbing you. President Shen is really drunk out of his mind. We have no idea what to do. Could you come and have a look? I was puzzled. Why call me? The other end hesitated for a moment. He has been calling your name. Can't you send him home? He won't let others get close. Then I also. President Shen is about to pass out. Give me the address. 19 As soon as the word slipped out, I regretted a little. Even if Vincent was really that drunk, what identity did I have to go and see him? Ex-wife. It was too strange. But since I had promised, I couldn't go back on my word. So I simply tittied myself up and hurried to the place according to the address. In a private room in a bar, Vincent was lying on his side on the table. His shirt half unbuttoned. His eyes blurred and his hair a little messy. He was waving his hand randomly in the air. And there were bottles all over the floor beside his feet. When the person beside him saw me, his eyes lit up immediately. Maggie? You're finally here. I walked over carefully. Before I could open my mouth, Vincent, whose wandering eyes caught sight of me. His slightly narrowed eyes suddenly widened. Maggie. Maggie. He sprang up from the table at once, his collar loosely revealing half of his shoulder. He looked up at me, his eyes glistening, and his expression gradually became a little aggrieved. He reached out, hugged my waist and buried his whole body in my arms. Do you really not like me at all? His voice came out muffled. He rubbed pitifully in my arms, making my whole body tingle. Actually, I know you don't like me. But I thought that I could always move you. Even just a little. Just a little would be okay. His voice grew smaller and smaller. And it was trembling. I felt as if my heart had been pricked. Feeling the helpless look of the guy beside me, I tried to push him away. Vincent. You're drunk. But he hugged me even tighter. As if he couldn't wait to merge himself into my body. Maggie. Why could you be so calm when you told me to marry someone else? I'm really so sad. Maggie. He buried his head in my arms. Through the thin cloth. I felt a small wet patch. Gradually spreading. It was cold. 20. I looked at the person beside me. What should we do? He spread his hands to me. Before you came. We had tried countless methods. But, as he was speaking, he reached out, then patted Vincent. The next second, Vincent was like an angry Sherpa fleece. And he knocked that hand away. Every pore on his body resisting his approach. He sighed. Look. Just like this. I was dumbfounded. Finally, having no other choice, I could only coax Vincent. Get up first. Shall we go home? He refused to let go. No. If I get up, you will disappear. His mumbling tone was extremely cute. I intertwined my hand with his. Then we'll hold hands all the time. And I won't disappear. He raised his head and stared at me unblinking wide with his misty eyes for a long time. Really? My heart softened as he stared at me. I nodded vigorously. Really? Only then did he slowly get up, tightly clasping the hand that was holding mine. Very cautiously. We walked out all the way like this. Holding hands. The warm yellow streetletid were reflected in his glistening eyes. As if there were twinkling starlight. Shining in bits and pieces. He was obediently led by me and refused to let go even when getting into the car. I had never seen such a Vincent before. He seemed very fragile. But also very cute. 21. When we arrived at the door of the house. If I didn't go in with him, Vincent wouldn't go in either. We tugged at each other at the door for a full 5 minutes. I had no choice but to accompany him into the house. I thought I would never enter this house where I had lived for more than 20 years again. Stepping in again. It still felt familiar. Betty was still working here. Seeing me, she was extremely surprised. Miss, you're back? I quickly pointed at Vincent. No. I'm just helping to send him back. Betty was stunned. And her mood immediately dropped. Is that so? I walked a few steps. And she couldn't help asking again. Miss, are you really unwilling to come back? I turned around. What do you mean by willing or not? This is no longer my home. How can I just come back whenever I want? But, Betty glanced at Vincent and hesitated to speak. All I could think about was sending Vincent back to his room quickly. So I didn't ask any more questions. During the time I was away, the furnishings in the house hadn't changed at all. Pushing open the bedroom door. The bed sheets and quilts on the bed were still the same as when I left. Even the pillows were placed neatly side by side. As if waiting for something. On the bedside table. There was still our wedding photo with Vincent that had been developed at some time. It didn't look like a divorced home at all. I picked up the crystal photo frame and was stunned for a moment. This was the ID photo we took when we got our marriage license. It was also one of the few photos of me and Vincent. Isn't it nice? Vincent suddenly asked. I nodded subconsciously. A smile appeared on his face. And he said as if taking credit. I developed it myself. So what if Maggie doesn't take pictures with me? We have a wedding photo. My thoughts were drawn back to 3 years ago. On the day we got our marriage license. I had a sullen face throughout the process. The staff kept asking me to smile. But I refused. The photographer complained. With this look in the wedding photo, you'll be a shrew after getting married. Vincent retorted unhappily. You don't know her. Why do you say such a thing? She just doesn't like to smile. She has a very good personality. He rubbed the small photo with half of the embossed seal on it with his fingertips. In the photo, I had no expression. And he was smiling slightly. He said, how beautiful. Back to the present. I smiled and patted Vincent's face. So capable of developing photos by yourself? As I smiled, tears unconsciously streamed down my face. Vincent. It seems that I'm really sorry to you. 22 Finally, I managed to coax Vincent to sleep. I said I was going to wash up. And he reluctantly let go of my hand. I pushed the door and went out. Betty was standing outside the door, looking as if she had been struggling for a long time. She gritted her teeth and said, "Miss, although I shouldn't say too much, after you left, Mr. Vincent has been like a lost soul all day. As soon as he gets home, he stares blankly at the sofa where you used to sit, staying there for 1 or 2 hours. A person who never ate coriander suddenly asked me why there was no coriander in the meal. He said you liked it and told me to cook what you liked every meal. Otherwise, what if you suddenly wanted to come home? And the bunch of flowers on the balcony, they were all dead, and I wanted to throw them away. But he wouldn't let me. The light in the bedroom was often still on in the early hours of the morning, and he stayed up all night long." Betty babbled a lot. Tears kept flowing from my eyes. Betty was almost about to cry. "Miss, come back. Mr. Vincent loves you very much. He can't bear to part with you." I wiped my tears, my mind in chaos. "Thank you, Betty." After thinking it over and over again, the foot that was originally ready to leave was withdrawn. I turned around and went back to the bedroom again. As soon as I pushed the door open, I found that Vincent hadn't fallen asleep at all. His eyes were wide open, staring intently at the door. Only when he saw me did he grin. "You're back." Then he lay back down in relief. 23 in the morning, when Vincent woke up, I had dark circles under my eyes because I had been up all night. I remember the night I had a fever. Not only did he stay by my side every step of the way, but he also took care of me in various ways non-stop. I tried to stay by his side all night too. It was so tiring. When Vincent saw me, a moment of surprise flashed in his eyes. He thought for a while and then closed his eyes again. A few seconds later, he opened them again, finding it was still me. He was stunned for a while and tentatively whispered, "Maggie?" I nodded. "Yes, I'm here." Almost instantly, he sat up from the bed. "You." He moved closer and probably noticed that my complexion was off. "Why are you here? Didn't you sleep all night?" I nodded warily. Vincent stared at me blankly as if he was gradually recalling things. A variety of expressions flashed across his face for a moment. Finally, he said in a hoarse voice, "I'm sorry." He paused. His eyes were full of heartache and guilt. "I troubled you last night. I didn't control myself. I didn't expect to be like this when drunk." I reached out and gently placed my hand against his lips to interrupt him. "Can you stop saying sorry to me?" He looked at me somewhat puzzled. I lowered my head. "I'm the one who should be sorry to you. So much. If you keep saying it, I will owe you for my whole life." Vincent was stunned for a moment. "What?" I pursed my lips and whispered, "I was very mean to you before. But I thought all night and still haven't figured out how to make it up to you." Vincent had a dazed expression and didn't react for a long while. I had to take the initiative to ask him, "Do you want me to stay here?" He finally reacted. He was so shocked that he almost couldn't control his expression. "Are you willing to stay?" 24 But soon, as if he realized something, before he had time to be happy, his mood gradually became low. "Is it because of last night? I did say things I shouldn't have. Did it make you pity me?" I quickly shook my head. "No. Seeing you sad did make me feel uncomfortable. But it's not out of pity." He asked, "Then what is it?" I told him seriously, "It's because I care about you too." Vincent lowered his head, but his ears gradually turned red. He hesitated for a long while. Can you say it again?" I was amused and wanted to laugh. I said, "Vincent, I care about you. Care about you a great deal." He pursed his lips, visibly enjoying it. I asked him, "What about you? I know you care about me. But I'm so bad and not nice to you. Aren't you angry at all?" Vincent furrowed his brows slightly. Who said you're not nice to me? When I was starting my business, you secretly hid my old clothes and replaced them all with new and expensive ones. And you helped me iron my suit and pinned on expensive cufflinks when I was away. When I didn't ask. You didn't say. When I asked. You said it was Betty. Is this being not nice to me? I was stunned. How did you know? Vincent smiled helplessly. The ironing skills between you and Betty. There are some differences. He put it very euphemistically. But I got what he meant. Is that so? Vincent held my hands up and squeezed them gently. You're right. Your hands are not born for doing work. They are for enjoying a happy life. He looked at me. Moreover, I love you. With this sudden confession, my heart skipped a beat. What did you say? He wasn't shy at all, and repeated it straightforwardly. I said I love you. No matter how you treat me, I will be happy to accept it. 25 Vincent said that he liked me. He liked me even before we got married. When he was in college, he worked in a milk tea shop. Sometimes, in order to save money, he didn't have dinner and waited for the remaining toppings when the shop closed to fill his stomach. The day I went there, his stomach growled twice. I said, "Why are you working on an empty stomach? What if the drinks you make don't taste good? Have another cup. It's on me." He wanted to refuse, but I glared at him. "If you dare not take my offer, you're in trouble." He said my threat was cute, but had no deterrent effect at all. But that time, he remembered me. The next time we met was when his grantade quota was occupied by someone with connections. When he was arguing with the teacher in the office, I showed up. I pointed at that counselor and scolded. "Are you crazy? You give the grantade donated by Maggie's family to someone whose family has an annual income of 10. Zaro? How dare you cheat with my money? Believe it or not, I'll ask my grandpa to take back the fund and expose you." As a result, the counselor apologized repeatedly. Vincent also got the grantade that should have belonged to him. He said that sum of money was very important to him at that time. But I didn't remember these things at all. I was stunned while listening. So early? Vincent took out a piece of paper from the bookcase. The edges were yellowish, wrinkled and a bit old. It was a sketch of me on it. A bit naive but very similar. At first, not knowing your identity, I could only draw you from memory. He rubbed the paper, his movements so skillful as if he had repeated them many times. I was stunned for a moment and couldn't help asking. "You've been secretly in love with me for so long. Was our marriage your premeditation?" Vincent shook his head. "No. Before, I only dared to look up to you and would not desecrate you. What happened later? I never dreamed of it. I must have saved the Milky Way in my previous life." 26 later. Vincent asked me again. Why did I insist on getting a divorce? I thought about it seriously for a while. Maybe it was my pitiful self-esteem at work. I just thought that, after what had happened, if I didn't get a divorce, I would lose face. It would be both embarrassing, and I would be too shy to cling to you. But if I didn't like you at that time, I would surely cling to you tightly and demand a share of your property. He looked at me and smiled. Sharing the property is okay. Anyway, all I have is yours. But not liking me. No, I love sick. After I moved back to Maggie's home, the happiest person was Betty. She wiped her eyes. Although Mr. Vincent is a nice person, but every day, he became so lifeless that I was scared to do my work. She hugged the housekeeper and cried bitterly. On the other side, Vincent looked at the empty cloakroom and asked a soul-searching question. "Where are your original things? I've always been wondering. Your own things are not cheap. Even if you sold them, they could be worth a lot of money. Why did you still go to deliver takeout?" I scratched my head awkwardly. "I sold them. But isn't Grandpa still in the hospital? That ward is very expensive. I don't know how much more money is needed. And I don't dare to spend it randomly. So I thought I could earn as much as I could myself." Vincent looked at me helplessly. You always say you're bad. Where on earth are you bad? I gave to dry laughs. Mainly to you. Vincent and I went to see Grandpa together. Grandpa's condition was relatively stable. Seeing us holding hands, he confessed with a smile. Vincent is a good boy. I could tell at a glance. At first, when you got married, I just wanted to find a good home for Maggie. If you can be together happily, I, an old man, will be happier than anyone else. Vincent was highly praised by Grandpa. On the surface, he just smiled gently. Turning around and leaving the ward, he asked me, Grandpa likes me, his grandson-in-law, so much. When do you plan to give me a proper status? I opened my mobile phone and took a look at the perpetual calendar. No way. All things are inauspicious today. Vincent pulled me into his arms and muttered, being with you. How can there be anything inauspicious? I looked up at him. Don't you know? On the day we got our marriage license for the first time, all things were inauspicious too. He immediately said, then change it. Then he leaned over and flipped through the pages backward. When is it auspicious for marriage? There is none this week. Then can you give me something else as consolation? What do you want? This evening. His voice lowered. My face flushed. Are you serious? I'm a poor little thing without a title. So I can be not serious. He smiled at me. I held my forehead. You've defeated me. No. Vincent shook his head. I don't want you to be defeated by me. I just want you to marry me. A glittering ring magically appeared in front of me. Maggie, will you marry me? I stared at that big white diamond, astonished. When did you buy another one? That's not the point. All right. I will. When did you buy this? Last month. You bought so many. You can't even wear them all. Maggie. Now it's me who is defeated by you. I don't want you to be defeated by me. Can't you marry me? What are you talking about? I'm saying, I love you. All right. I love you too.